if you hear somebody say that you cannot target under pressure, under stress, like, you need to move on, take the class, put whatever in your proverbial toolbox per se. And because it's not going to bolt on to anything, but you need to absolutely learn how to target under pressure.
I've never had a time in my professional life where Americans have been more concerned about their own self-protection. So there's probably no subject that has more mystery around it, more legend, more just esoterical BS than knives. Knives are a very simple, straightforward tool, but you got to understand exactly what makes a knife effective. And so a lot of you have been asking questions, and so I'm brought on somebody who, I was amazed that he said yes, he was going to do it, because again, he's another one of these people that's kind of reclusive when it comes to PR. Again, he works in a group. You recently saw my interview with Tom Kyer. He works in that same group that was Sayoc Tactical. His name is Frank Windle. You'll get to see him, but what was interesting was, he's not the easiest guy to get pictures of that are available. And again, I'm not, I'm going to respect the fact that, in the worlds that he works in and what he does, you're going to get to see him. So we'll get to that. But he has Northman knives. His products are just amazing. This is an example of his work. This is not what he made for me, but I have something similar. He did a short hawk for me, and a Sky King blade is what it's called. But he has many different. He makes knives for some of the top operators in the world, and they absolutely trust him. But he himself is a fantastic instructor. And the one thing I really wanted to talk to him about was the idea of, how do you integrate everything? He's very good at integrating combatives. So you can go from empty hand to knife to gun. And his thoughts on that are very, very solid. And I wanted to share that with you because he's a very interesting guy. So this is going to be a three-part interview. Again, we're going to go over a variety of things. We'll go over knife making, his background, what's important. There's some real gems in this, like exactly what does make a knife? When you're designing a knife, what is, one of the most important key components? And again, it's who, the reason I brought him is because who he provides knife. These guys trust this guy, Frank, to build their knives. And it says a lot. And again, the thing I love about it is it's very practical, very straightforward. And I think you're going to really enjoy this interview. So without further ado, Frank Windle. Frank Windle, thank you for taking the time to talk to us today, man. Been a long time coming. We got some mutual friends. And, my first introduction to you was through a good mutual friend of ours who I told him, I said, I was really unhappy with the blade I was carrying. And I started to do some work with him, and he turned me on to you. And the reason I wanted to bring you on is for your knowledge, that way. I think your blade work is amazing. What you offer people, and the fact that you make it for real operators, you make it for the guys that you are your customers are actually out there doing it, using it. So you get good feedback that way. But the other thing is your approach to training is really interesting. And I just interviewed Tom Kyer, who I know is a friend of yours, and everybody talks very highly of your combatives ability, and in particular your ability to make transitions from pure just empty hand to the blade to the gun. So I think what we should do is, why don't we start off? Why don't you give everybody a little bit about your background, how you got to this, and then probably we'll guide it towards like the knives first, and just kind of because I think there's a lot of great stuff you can share with people on how to understand what a knife that you really might need to use to protect yourself. There are some advantages that you'd want to know about. So,
yeah, for sure. So, Tim, I'm humbled to be on your program here, and I appreciate it quite a bit. Yes, we come from the we come from the same background, sort of, same group of friends, and I enjoy now having time to talk to you. So basically, I was born and raised in New England, in Maine specifically. Moved back here. I was an Army guy, just a regular Army dude. Did my time in the Army, got out of the Army, moved back home, and started doing security work, mostly in bars. And coming from a background of a sports athlete background, meaning basically, well, I'm sure you know what it means, but basically wrestling, judo, stuff like that, that has refs, coaches. And it was hard for me at first to kind of, like, I could control dudes all day long, but then there was a missing element there. As a good mentor of mine calls it, Justin Garcia, or Master Jim, calls it a capital V in violence. That element was missing. So I had to seek out subject matter experts on that, but we can get into that later. Fast forward a bunch, started training different weapon systems through different people, ended up in the tribe, so to speak. And then from there, I train every day. I train a multitude of weapon things, or weapon disciplines, if you will. And I also make blades. I make blades. I think right now I am approaching 3,000 blades that I've made by hand myself. So there's nobody else. There's nobody else that helps me here. It's me solo doing all that blade work. So when someone orders a blade, basically it's my handwork. I'm the only one that touches it from its birth till I pass it to you, which is a little interesting in itself, I guess. So that's it in the fly overview per se.
Yeah, what was interesting to me was you, from what I understand, you quickly took to it. When you learned. Our mutual friend said, yeah, we both started out. We made a blade. He goes, yeah, and then then Frank just left. He goes, Frank just went, and he just took off, and he became the guy. And I got a short hawk from you, and then I got a Sky King blade. One of your blades there. A mutual friend of ours recommended it. Great for my hand. But the whole process of going through that with you was really cool. You're good at keeping in touch with people, but you go through this path. You get in. You start getting in with this group, and then that group obviously starts bringing in a lot of people that are doing real work in the real world. Various groups from various places. And I'm not dancing. I'm just being, the one thing people have to understand is that, I'm bringing on a lot of people that are actually doing the work. They didn't do it 20 years ago. They're doing it now. And you have to be very careful how you say what you say. But, the one thing that was interesting was a lot of the operators really like your blades, and they're highly sought after. Can you kind of, I've said this in a couple other interviews when I've talked to people that actually have used, blade work, prison guys, all this other stuff. Can you kind of give everybody kind of a primer on what a blade that you would use to protect yourself? What are the components behind it? How do you go about designing something that is going to get operational use?
Well, there's a specific, a lot of these formulas, I'll tell you, Tim, and I have to give credit where credit is due, is a lot of Sayoc Kali based formulas. My teacher and mentor in the whole blade making process, Tom Kyer, established that with me very on. And to get back to just what you kind of said is, our mutual friend and I made a blade together, a left hand and a right hand, almost a mimic blade in one weekend. And it was awesome. When I tend to do stuff, I go full speed. I dive in, and Doesn't matter what it is. If I show an interest in it, I'm full on in. So that meant coming home. I can remember my wife getting out of bed at 2 a.m. in the morning, and before I even had a shop or built anything, I was in the driveway in, a foot of snow grinding blades. And she would come down and just kind of say, what is wrong with you? Is there something wrong right now? And I get so fixated and tunneled into certain things when I'm interested in, and then it just carries over from there. So basically, back to an element, the correct elements of blades. It really depends on what the use is. But there's a certain amount of design elements that's universal. These are not my designs per se. These are universals that are ancient for people that you have used blades for, a billion years, that has been around. So you take that aspect. So I'm a huge history guy. I love history, love the course of weapons through history. And no, I do a lot of research. Now, some blades come from history with a modernized, using the elements of that formulas from Sayoc to make these blades. And handle length is very important. And what blade goes on the handle is very important. What typically you see is a disconnect between the handle and the blade, or they just put a handle, and just because they put a ring on a handle doesn't make it any better. And I'm not busting on any makers out there. You sell what you sell, but specifically there's a perfect length per se, and it needs to mirror what the blade is, and then the handle is designed around people's hands, without getting into specifics. If we make a handle very specific to the hand, we give it almost one function. It has to be held this way. And I tend to steer away from that. I tend to keep it a little bit more open. So there's a multitude of grips you can use with my stuff. And basically it complements the blade. The handle complements the blade, the size and the features complement the blade, and basically put that package together. And when people put hands on it, they're like, that's what it's supposed to feel. That's what it's supposed to be. Got it. Now I'm going to put my other stuff away, and that's basically the elements. I can tell you there's specific sizes of handles that you need to have on specific blades, but that's like giving away a trade secret.
Right. Is there a different, there's a lot of, especially now, man, you're just seeing everybody's is making, knives now, combat knives, supposedly. I noticed yours, you're very specific in the look and the feel of what you do. I'm not looking for a trade secret, but can you talk about why your blade design, especially the way the points are, the way points are, I'm probably using the wrong terminology, but it seems very specific, meaning it's not, we were talking earlier about this, and I don't have a problem with you, telling people what to avoid from that aspect, because if somebody's going out and they're truly buying this, they're not buying it to collect it. They're buying it because they're going to carry it, and they think they might have to use it one day, possibly. They should know what they're buying when it comes to that. What do you need to look for in a design that way, that will actually, if you needed to put it into a human and you need to protect yourself, you'd actually get a better result?
Sure. So to just back up a quarter step, we want the tip. So if we look at the tip of the blade, we want that to come out in the center of the rear of the blade. So I don't know how good we can see this here. So I don't know if you can see this, Tim. So yep. We have the tip, and then if we draw a line all the way down through, the tip comes out in the
Got it.
center of the rear of the blade.
Okay.
This is important. This is about the most important thing. If it trails or it falls, it doesn't make it very appealing to thrusting. So, you know, without getting into massive statistics and all the other malarkey, a 4-inch, a blade that you carry every day, is not meant for slashing. Now it can be used for slashing. But slashing, if we talk about violence, slashing doesn't typically incapacitate people. Thrusting does, and it's targeting under pressure. Basically, if we boil it all down, if we distill it all down, it's targeting under pressure is what the ultimate goal in your training and in this is. It's being able to target something, and I've seen it on several of your videos. You're essentially targeting under pressure. That's our goal, is to be able to target under pressure. If this doesn't meet the target because it's trailing or it's the tip is off, that's a targeting issue, right?
Yeah.
So other key features on a blade, it should have some sort of a puño, or some guys will call it a pommel or a puño. So some way to access this off a draw. Not all blades have to have a puño. Sometimes it will be a little more open, but you have to be able to draw it. Other important things in a blade is I prefer a full flat ground blade. I prefer some sort of swedge on the top. It doesn't have to be sharpened. Other than that, some sort of jimping, so the blade's not slipping in your hand. And then the biggest key is this is a sheathing system, or a system that you can deploy and access it.
Yes.
By far the best. And that in the industry is lacking probably the most. Second is design. Sheathing systems are just absolutely scary. So it's the ability to put this away, you know, put this away with one hand and not be able to, fiddle around or anything like that. And that takes practice, but having that system is huge. The accessibility of your tool is huge. So
yeah, I noticed this. Everything's really smooth, and when I use it, even your training blades are that way too. You know, the training blade, the trainer that I have, yours is that way when you're practicing. That's one thing I really noticed, is that the idea is everything's thought about that way, about from where you're gonna be drawing it from to where you're gonna be returning it to. That whole methodology of how you do things, and the way you were explaining having kind of the wedge, I thought was interesting, because I mean, a lot of times people don't understand that, like, how that helps open up in a thrust, a lot of these vital areas that you're going after. A lot of, it's funny, I forgot who was pointing it out to me, but somebody's pointing me out on one of your blades saying, do you see how this design is? He goes, this way, when the wound goes in, when the blade goes in, you're actually going to get a larger area in the thrust. It's designed that way.
Yeah. Post-penetration wound.
Yes.
Huge. And then depending on what that person does, he may make it even larger, depending if he moves back and forth. Essentially, we are very soft inside, although some people might think they're very hard inside. We are actually very soft inside and easy to cut, per se. So, the methodology there, or the correct, and it's a Sayoc term, is LOT, is to have all that forethought, all that thought process out, and this is the reason why. This is the reason why it's like that. So you just have to it's like dotting your I's and crossing your T's, and all I have to do is, to the end user, and I use that in the most respectful way, the end, this is what you do with it, check. And then we start training, so that's kind of the whole process of that. And there's many people before me that make excellent blades. I am just one of the new up and comers. I've been doing this for 5 years, and it's it's a passion of mine. It's not I don't look at it businessy. I look at it as this is a passion. Like when someone says, ask me, I go, I love making blades. Just love it, and it's whether it's a pastime or a hobby, it's to me, it's just a mega passion, that and training,
Yeah.
that is.
What are some of the things that, we've got a lot of people that watch the channel. Some of them are trying to get into using blades. Obviously, I mean, I just did like the interview with Tom and talked about the approach that you guys take, which I think is really, really outstanding on a lot of stuff. But what are you seeing out there as far as, you've been training a long time and you've been training with some top people, and what are you seeing, especially when you go around to the shows and stuff like that, and you hear some of this, like what we're trying to do in this, is educate people to get the best approach, and anything we can tell people, hey, you just absolutely want to avoid this. What are some things you're seeing when it comes to people, training with the blade or whatever they're calling it, knife fighting or whatever? What are some things to look for? What are some things to avoid?
So I guess one of the first things to avoid, and this goes, I'll tell you, this goes in almost like a universal thing that you can apply this, is if you hear somebody say that you cannot target under pressure, under stress, like you need to move on, take the class, put whatever in your proverbial toolbox per se. And because it's not going to bolt on anything, but you need to absolutely learn how to target under pressure. This is the key. What makes a guy very capable and very scary per se is the ability to transfer from weapon system to weapon system without hesitation. And building that takes time and it takes training. So
it takes deliberate too, like a deliberate training that you have to do. You can't just you got to have everything right so that when you do need it at full speed, you've got it locked in correctly.
This was a thing that I just did for some folks, and it was a little video series on correct drilling. And not that I'm the greatest speaker. I've been punched in the head a lot, so I fumble over words and stuff like that. Sometimes I go on tangents and I go that way, but basically it's the ability to understand how to train, and corrected drilling is a huge component of that. So we have the imaginary stuff where people can just stand there and do katas and punch air. And then we have the people that just do drilling, just do absent drilling. So drilling without any quote unquote resistance, and or we just continue to do it to a scarecrow per se. And then the echelon goes from that. The correct drilling is kind of where there's a buildup, and then there's sequences beyond that absolutely is a necessary thing. And then you go to the other end where you see a lot of and I'm not picking on anybody, a lot of jiu-jitsu schools will just do, all it is just sparring, so you have a very low learning in when it's just open rolling and I come from a grappling background, many years of and you can make it as simple as you want, or you can make it more difficult as you want. And basically, if you're just hard rolling every single night more than you're drilling, you're doing it wrong. Right. It goes for a lot of things too. So, and that's me going on a tangent. See?
No, actually, it's actually straight up, because that's what people don't understand is that if you don't take the time to drill, to know where to put the effort, and how to put it in, it's not going to be there for you at full speed. And you're going to be relying on pure strength and athleticism. And that's the problem. That's the problem with it, with a lot of it, especially a lot of the guys that, are younger guys that you work with. they're relying on that all the time, and they think it's always going to be there for you. And it's just a guarantee when you need this stuff, it's not going to, most likely it's going to be a day where you don't have that, you just don't have all of it. And so you're going to want to make sure that you got that technique down, that you do everything right. I always assume it's going to be on the worst day of your life. You're going to be feeling kind of flu-like. You've let your situational awareness go down. You get your feet kicked out from under you, and that's your starting point. You bounce your head off the concrete, and that's go time for you. And if you train consistently to make sure that whatever you do gets a result, and goes into that, that's what I really like about the idea of you guys targeting, because if that was the truth, then why would we train firearms the way we train firearms? If you're on there, I don't understand why people don't see the consistency between, training your brain and body, training with a tool, and then training with a firearm. And yet probably one of the most chaotic things is the firearm. And yet the methodologies we use to train firearms are very deliberate,
You're creating a conflict within yourself by not doing that.
Yeah.
So by not targeting under pressure without a firearm or with a blade, you're creating a conflict within yourself, So it's the difference between elbowing somebody in the orbital socket and elbowing somebody in the delt or the shoulder, So great, right? But what's the better target, right? Collarbone or something like that, or whatever. But what's the end goal of training? I love the fact that you brought up on the day. Listen, you might not feel great. You might not be that physical specimen that you train for. You might have tweaked your knee, putting on your pants or whatever. Right. So man, where's in your training circle, where are you at with everything else? My goal, I'll tell you, with my circle is to be 80%. Yep. Because I'm never 100%. I can tell you I'm 100%, but in reality, I'm old and I'm beat up. And, if I hold an 80% in all the forms of violence and ability, I'm a capable guy. That's capability, holding that there. So the guys that I train, I'm like, shoot for a solid 80 in everything, because there's one of those pieces that you're going to be a little low on, Yep. So just be realistic, have good, correct visualization. Like, you're not Superman, even though, some people wish they were. And, you're not going to summons that on the day. There's no magic, right?
Yeah. And that's what I like about your approach to things. You guys are very methodical about how you train. Okay. So that's a great place to stop for part one. You got a really good feel of, Frank and his thoughts. I thought at the end there, that idea of training for the 80% in everything that you can do, every aspect of what you can do, is such a solid goal. It's realistic. But it makes a hell of a lot of sense when you think about it. I think a lot of people don't train because they think they need to be 100%. And so if they can't do it 100%, they're not going to train. And that's really what I like about, Frank's approach with this. We're going to go from here. We're going to stop by. I said, hey, basically the methodologies. And now we're going to go more into, his thoughts on, knives, training aspects, training solo too in this interview. He has some really unique ways. He actually got me to rethink solo training a little bit on this. And it's really been fun going with this. But I hope you enjoyed your first taste of Frank Windle and what he can do. And remember, make sure you subscribe to the channel, hit the notification buttons, make comments. Let us know how you like this stuff. Also, please share it. And also, there's things that we just can't go too in depth on YouTube. If you want the unfiltered information, go to timlarkin.com, sign up for your free masterclass. That way, we don't have to worry about how we say what you need to hear. All the best.